This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
Seven years ago, in August of 2009, a mystery took place. A 15-year-old girl named Kayla Berg went missing from Antigua, Wisconsin. Her story is sad and unfortunate, but needs to be told. Her mom and dad were divorced, living just 5 miles from each other. Kayla and her brother were allowed to visit either parent freely. One day, she received a ride from her brother's friend to meet up with her friends at a local McDonald's. After she hung out and relaxed with her friends, that same brother's friend picked her up and took her driving around town before dropping her off at her boyfriend's house. Here's where it gets strange. Her mother later claimed that the home where Kayla was dropped off at was condemned and there should not have been anyone living there. How is this possible? How is it that that friend drove away without noticing this abandoned house? Presumably, Kayla was missing. With their loosely watched living situation between parents, it took her mom 6 days to realize she was missing before she reported it to the police. 2 months later, in October of 2009, a video on YouTube appeared from a man named Patrick. He was very eager to announce the news to his friend Walter. In the video, under the subject, "Hi Walter, I got a new girlfriend today," Patrick enthusiastically talked about how happy he was finding a girlfriend and so on. And then he proceeded to reveal his girlfriend. He claims she's camera shy, but then opens the door to his basement, revealing a girl hog-tied on the floor and terrified. Although it wasn't clear, but in the video this girl's face resembled Kayla, the missing girl. Who was this girl in the video? Could it be her? The video was later removed for violating YouTube's policy on violent and graphic content. But in 2016, some Reddit user brought this video back to the people's attention. The video was made sometime after Kayla went missing, and Reddit users speculated that the video might be connected to the missing person, Kayla, and decided to bring it to the attention of the FBI. They started to investigate deeper, and now even poor Kayla's mother was getting pulled back into this hellish nightmare because of the internet and the person named Patrick. As of now, since October 12, 2016, the FBI announced that Patrick's video was fake. This is madness. 2150 Studio made a video that just happens to connect to the incident, and all those people in the video were actors. If this is true, how can they do this? The saddest part, though, is that this video gave her mother false hope. Maybe now that the case has some activity, Kayla's family will soon know the truth, and it will put it all to rest. The internet can be a double-edged sword. At times very helpful, and at the same time, very hurtful. My heart goes out to Kayla's mother. Thanks for watching. Until next time.
Susan Cox Powell. Now, that name may be familiar to many of you. She was the young Utah mom who went missing nearly 10 years ago. So what happened to Susan? Where did the investigation go wrong? And what took place since that may have you floored? Oxygen's two-night special event, The Disappearance of Susan Cox Powell. It airs this Saturday and Sunday. And here with what we can expect is Susan's mother, Judy, along with investigative journalist Stephanie Bauer. It's great having both of you. Welcome in.
Thank you.
Judy, let's start with you. Obviously, this story is heart-wrenching, and unlike us, we're watching as viewers. You lived this. This is your daughter. Tell us about your daughter and what happened on the night of December 6th, 2009.
Well, that was a Sunday, and she went to church, and then later on, she had a friend come over to help with some yarn, and Josh chose to make pancakes for everyone, and that was very questionable because he doesn't cook. Yeah. And he made them individually, and that, he just, it wasn't in his way of doing things, and it was women's work, and so we were surprised about that. And then when she wasn't feeling well, we felt that she possibly could have been poisoned or whatever. So I think she went back and laid down to rest. And then Josh supposedly took the boys and left for sledding, and then came back and then took them to go camping after midnight in a snowstorm. So yeah, we were very concerned and knew there was a problem.
Yeah, something's definitely amiss there, and as it often happens, the police are investigating missing persons case. What's going on? Stephanie, tell us about the case and where that investigation fell short.
Sure. I think the main problem is that the investigators ran out of time. As you'll watch the show, you'll see that there's tragic events that just kept happening, and Josh ended up killing himself and his 2 young children. So while law enforcement definitely thought that he was responsible for Susan's disappearance, they didn't do anything about it in time. And now who can be held responsible? Were there other influencers there? We look into Josh's father, Stephen Powell, in the series, and we bring up a new theory that we think could be a distinctive timeline on Susan's last moments. And as Judy mentioned, there's the pancakes, and there's the fact that he went camping, and then once Susan went missing, he moved, and he canceled her cell phone and canceled the babysitters as if he knew she wasn't coming home. Wow. We're going to look into all of that in this series.
It's absolutely ridiculous. I know that the husband and the kids, unfortunately, all perished a few years after her disappearance. The story with the father is really kind of creepy. Supposedly he had an infatuation with her.
He did. He had a severe infatuation with her, and Susan had told her parents and friends that she thought her father-in-law liked her, and he definitely made her uncomfortable. But only now are we able to see these hours and hours and hours of home video that he had of Susan. He was recording without her knowing, everything from under the bathroom door through just down the hallway where she couldn't even see that he was there. Very sick and disturbing stuff, and what we can put on TV, we are going to air so people can see what you really need to be careful with when you're living with someone or you're unsure of a situation. We want everyone to see that, and hopefully it will provide some answers about the final moments of Susan's life.
Saw a couple of pieces of that video just now, and it really is kind of disturbing. Judy, really quickly, this is about finding closure for you, finding the truth. What is this about for you?
This is getting her name back out there, and it's something that all women should know and be able to realize it could happen to them. Yeah. And if you feel uncomfortable or things don't seem right, listen to that feeling and get out of the relationship and get help. And so I want people to know that it's important that they look at their relationships and how they're being treated.
No question. Judy, my heart goes out to you and your family. Stephanie, great job on this, and it's great talking to you. Thank you so much.
Welcome to episode 19 of True Crime Access. The year is 2009, and we've already been here once, but we have to come back and visit this year once again. In the comparison searches from the killer's computer, we have 3 names: Susan Powell, Lindsay Baum, and Kayla Berg. Most of what we already covered happened in April of 2009, and it revolved around the Tupper Lake bank robbery and the case of Deborah Feldman. But what we came back for was to see, what was he doing the rest of the year? Why was Kayla Berg's image on his computer? And even though I was barely done with 2008, I had to move on to 2009 in order to get this case as close to closed as I could.
Guess what? It's raining. Yeah. So this note will have rain in the background. That will be the music. Ever read about a case where a kid says, "I saw the devil"? Like something terrible happened and they say they saw the devil. I wondered when I was wrapping up 2008, moving into 2009, I looked at this real specific set of cases, kind of spanning all these different years, but where it came to a head for me, there's a Sioux City case that really bothered me. It doesn't have anything to do with this killer. There's this other one. I was like, I wonder if there's other things like that. And there was another one in 2008. And I say that because those cases get closed and they just get written off forever. And they're done. There was a Toronto case. Whole family wiped out. Except for this one kid. And at the scene, horrible, horrible double murder, suicide, supposedly. I look at it and I go, I wonder what really happened there. I wonder if the kid knows. But I think of those cases where the kid saw a demon, saw the devil. What did this killer's face look like when he was committing his crimes? And that, how many cases are there like this that aren't closed correctly? And that stands out to me is like how many children were affected. Because I tried at one point to count up the number of children involved, affected. You can't do it right now. And this case never ends. It never ends. And, big reveal out in the future, whatever we're going to tell people. However, we're going to tell people what we know. And I look at these cases and just wonder, how many other killers like him are there out there? Something to be terrified of, I guess.
From the Toronto City News on May 23, 2008, stabbing and strangulation, not fire, killed victims in double murder-suicide. It was a terrible tragedy that left a young boy an orphan and likely to be forever haunted by the actions of his own father. An autopsy has revealed the causes of death of 3 people involved in a ghastly double murder-suicide last Saturday night in the Don Mills and Lawrence area. Crews arrived to find an apartment unit in flames at 50 Greenbelt Drive in Toronto, and a search for survivors the next day turned up a grim toll. 3 bodies were still inside the burned-out residence. 2 of them died especially gruesome deaths, but it had nothing to do with the fire. One of the victims, the 46-year-old mother, succumbed to what police call a penetrating stab wound to the heart. The child's 70-year-old grandmother was the victim of strangulation. The man police suspect put all of this carnage in motion, the 41-year-old father, is the only one who died as a direct result of the fire that he's believed to have set. The autopsy showed that his end came due to smoke inhalation. It may never be known what set off this tragic series of events that has torn a family apart forever, but court documents show that the father was convicted of assaulting and threatening to kill the mother back in 2005. Relatives say the couple had reconciled and were getting along much better. No one in the family ever suspected what was coming. The lone survivor in this deadly domestic incident is the most innocent. A 3-year-old child was left in front of the building superintendent's door with a note apparently from the father that seemed to confess to his actions and promising a long taped explanation in his car. But when police listened to the cassette, it was blank. The disturbed father had left the son one last gift before he died, a bottle of milk, so the child would not go hungry. The child is going to be cared for by relatives who have already agreed to take him in. There were several unusual missing persons cases and unusual crimes that we took a look at in 2009, including an entire family disappearing. We had 1, possibly 2 witness crimes, and we had another mother and her daughters who were never seen again. Let's jump right into the possibilities of 2009. Benjamin Joseph Barrick was last seen in Bovina, Mississippi on January 25, 2009. He lived with his dog in the 5100 block of Warriors Trail in Vicksburg, Mississippi. 2 days before his disappearance, Barrick took his tenant, Sean Paul Sponholtz, to the hospital. He had been stabbed multiple times in the neck. He died of his injuries in the emergency room, and his death was ruled a homicide. Sean had rented a cabin on Barrick's property for a few months prior to his death. Barrick was held overnight by police as a material witness. He was questioned and released. He stated that he found Sean injured at his home. When the police went to his home to speak to him on January the 26th, he was gone. An extensive search of the area turned up no sign of him. Authorities have identified a suspect in Sponholtz's murder, but haven't named this person publicly. They believe the murder and Barrick's disappearance are connected, and Barrick may have also met with foul play. He was unemployed at the time of his disappearance. He has 1 daughter and 1 son. He was a longtime resident of Vicksburg. Barrick was born in Texas and served with the Army in the Vietnam War. He still has family members in Texas, but they hadn't been in contact with him for decades prior to his disappearance. Benjamin Barrick was 55 years old, 6 feet 1 inches tall, and weighed 185 pounds. He has brown hair and hazel eyes. He had a mustache, goatee, and sideburns to just below his earlobes at the time of his disappearance. He has tattoos on his face, right hand, and left forearm. His case and Sean's murder remain unsolved.
On February 27, 2009, Jody Hockett of Grand Prairie was reported missing to RCMP. Jody, also known as Jessie, was last seen during the late hours of February 21st and 22nd between 102nd Avenue and 101st Street. She was seen sitting in the truck with a man. Then she got out of the truck, crossed the street, and got into an older white car. The car drove away, and Hockett has not been heard from since. Hockett is 33 years old, 5 feet 5 inches tall, 140 pounds, with long strawberry blonde hair. When last seen, she was wearing light blue jeans, brown stiletto heels, and a white tank top. If you have information on this or any other crime, please call Crime Stoppers toll-free.
And right around the time of the Tupper Lake bank robbery, there was another interesting killer operating in the Northeast U.S., who also killed at least one person working in the sex trade, who would also talk to investigators for a short period of time and eventually commit suicide in their jail cell.
I'm Maria Kramer at the Boston Globe. We're here downtown outside of the Suffolk District Attorney's office, where he has just given a press conference talking about the entire evidence that investigators had collected against Philip Markoff, who at this point we all know was accused of killing a young New York woman in a Back Bay hotel in 2009.
Not only was this a serial armed robber and a vicious murderer, but when I get the call after the murder at the hotel that there had been a subsequent armed robbery in Rhode Island committed by the same individual, I realized that we were dealing with someone that murdered without hesitation and would not stop doing what he was doing until we stopped him. And so we had the trappings of a serial murder case here about to take off.
The district attorney, Daniel Conley, he did take us through some evidence that we had not heard before, some gruesome details that we had not heard before. For example, the blood that was still on Philip Markoff's shoes the day he was arrested. This would have been the blood of Jalissa Brisman. But in between the time that he robbed this first prostitute and then killed Jalissa, he went to Baltimore to meet his grandparents for Passover, for a Passover Seder, which is a very eerie detail. You know, you think about the things that he was doing, and then he just goes and takes part in a family, traditional family ritual. It was a startling detail to hear that. The one question that won't be answered in those files that we've received and have yet to look through, and that wasn't answered by Dan Conley at the press conference, is why Philip Markoff did this. Dan Conley said all he can tell us is maybe we should ask a forensic psychologist. It's not clear why somebody would have attacked these women, especially somebody with such a bright future who had never had a criminal record. Some things are just not explainable.
The more evidence that seems to point toward this second-year medical student, the more vocal former acquaintances become.
I mean, you never want to hear about anyone being hurt like that, you know, especially someone who you knew and who was your friend.
As friends and family gathered for Jalissa Brisman's wake in rainy New York City, a police source revealed a grim connection between her and Philip Markoff, the man police say is her killer. Officers say they recovered a pair of Brisman's underwear in Markoff's apartment. They also found a semi-automatic handgun hidden in a copy of Gray's Anatomy, a popular medical school textbook. And in Rhode Island, investigators now say the plastic restraining ties used in the attempted robbery of a woman advertising erotic services exactly match the plastic ties found in Markoff's apartment. Police say gambling is a possible motive for the crimes. Even in Markoff's high school yearbook, the senior writes, "I bequeath my poker-playing skills to Andy Finley so he won't lose his dad's house." At his high school in Sherrill, New York, Markoff joined the bowling team, golf, and was even active in the youth court. And we're learning more about Markoff's past. Morgan Houston was a college friend of Markoff's, study buddies in the same pre-med fraternity. She tells the New York Daily News about her close call with Markoff 4 years ago after a night of partying.
In the doorway, he pushed me up against the wall and tried kissing me. And I was trying to furtively push him away and say, "No, Phil, get off me." And I couldn't physically get him off of me. And one of my friends was coming back that we had been out with at the same moment, and he had to physically pull him off me.
She says it was the only time he was aggressive toward her. ABC News has learned that this weekend, Markoff and his fiancée had reservations to stay at the Foxwoods Casino in Connecticut, something that got the attention of Connecticut Attorney General Richard Blumenthal.
We have a responsibility to protect children and women and anyone who may be victims of these kinds of criminal activities that may involve human trafficking, child exploitation, other brutal and violent crime.
Precisely why Blumenthal wants erotic portions of the site shut down. In an interview with the Boston Globe, Craigslist CEO denied the site offers sex-related services, despite its erotic services section. Police say it is there that Markoff found all of his alleged victims.
The fiancée is still not talking, and she is sticking by Markoff. Also, police say that she was used to a lavish lifestyle, that Markoff bought her expensive gifts, and the money may have come from women that they say he was robbing.
And in the show notes, I'll put a link to a clip of this killer talking, just so you can see if you hear any similarities with someone else we know. And we have a few more crimes and missing persons to cover for 2009.
Gerald Myers lived in Centennial, Colorado, and was vacationing in Alaska at the time of his disappearance. He was last seen on May 21, 2009, while in the process of climbing Mount McKinley. The mountain is, at 20,320 feet, the highest peak in North America. At 4:30 a.m. that day, Myers left a note for his two climbing companions at 14,200 feet, saying he was going on ahead, quote, as far as I can, safely, end quote. He stopped at a camp at 19,200 feet and picked up some skis at 11 o'clock a.m. He was last seen on a ridge near 18,900 feet on the west face of the mountain. Approaching the summit, Myers was carrying minimal survival gear at the time of his disappearance, but he did have a radio and a locator beacon. An extensive search of the mountain turned up no sign of him. Myers worked as a chiropractor at the Arapahoe Chiropractic and Acupuncture Center in Centennial at the time of his disappearance. He has a bachelor's degree in neuroscience from the University of Pittsburgh, and he got his chiropractic training at Western States Chiropractic College in Oregon. He's a U.S. Army veteran and very experienced climber who had planned the Mount McKinley climb for years. Authorities could find no evidence that Myers had become victim to an avalanche. They think it's more likely that he fell into a crevasse. He is the 106th person known or presumed to have died on Mount McKinley since 1932. Gerald Myers was 41 years old. He has blonde hair. His body has never been found. John Melvin Weipert was last heard from sometime in mid-June 2009. He was working as a caretaker at the Ptarmigan Lake Lodge in the Wrangell St. Elias National Park and Preserve near Northway, Alaska. His duties included protecting the property from marauding bears. He's never been heard from again. The lodge is situated only a few miles from the Canadian border. Weipert has been hired by the lodger's owner, Urban Rajoy, in May. Rajoy planned to buy him a plane ticket to the lower 48 states. In August, John's absence was discovered when Urban dropped by with groceries in the first week of July and found the property was deserted. One door had been taken off its hinges, and another had its hinges cut in half. The freezer was fully defrosted, and there was bacon in the sink and rotting food on the counter. Two horses stabled at the lodge, a bay gelding and a black gelding, disappeared along with John. Both are branded with a star and a half circle. He left a third horse in the corral and 9 more in the stables. The horse in the corral was starving and dehydrated when it was found. John left a note saying, "Gone to check out the cabin. Back tomorrow night." However, there is no cabin within a day's ride of the lodge. It's possible that John tried to travel on horseback to Beaver Creek, 35 miles to the north. He told Urban he wanted to go to Canada along the White River. Urban had recommended the Beaver Creek route instead. He left maps of the United States and Canada spread out in the lodge, and the Beaver Creek route was marked. John is unfamiliar with the area and left his driver's license and clothing behind. An extensive search of the area turned up no indication of his whereabouts, but foul play is not suspected in this case. John Weipert was 60 years old, 5 feet 8 inches tall, and weighed 190 pounds. He has gray hair and blue eyes. His case remains unsolved.
Today we got confirmation remains found by hunters in eastern Washington last fall are indeed those of the missing girl from McCleary.
Tonight, the Grays Harbor County Sheriff wants help finding her killer.
South Bureau Chief Drew Mickelson has our coverage and the emotional news conference from the sheriff. Drew.
Well, Mark, nearly 9 years ago, that Sheriff Rick Scott told us he feared this Lindsay Baum case would haunt him the rest of his career. And today, he had to deliver the news no one wanted to hear.
I'm here today to share with you that We've brought Lindsay home. We've recovered her.
Hunters in eastern Washington discovered Lindsay Baum's remains last September, but they weren't positively identified until sometime in the past 2 weeks.
Sadly, she was not recovered as we and her family had hoped and prayed these last 9 years.
In June of 2009, police, the National Guard, the FBI,
missing child,
and countless volunteers started searching for Lindsay Baum. The 10-year-old, who loved writing poems and reading, disappeared while walking home from her friend's house in McClary.
I just need her to come home.
Hope was a constant theme whenever Lindsay's mother, Melissa Baum, spoke with us over the years. She always said her girl would someday come home safe.
I can't imagine living without hope. If I had none, I don't think I could make it through a day. In our position, that's all you have.
Sheriff Rick Scott says while the outcome is sad, he hopes this new development in an old case will help solve the mystery.
Somebody out there has that nugget of information that we need to bring this case to complete closure and culminate in an arrest. And we urge those people to have the courage to come forward.
We asked the sheriff why it took a couple of weeks for him to deliver this news and make it public. He would not comment on that. He also is not willing to disclose where the remains were found, other than saying it was in eastern Washington. He also would not answer any questions about any potential suspects, only saying that no one has been arrested and they need the public's help. The sheriff says he has been in touch with Lindsay Baum's family, and they are requesting privacy tonight. Obviously, this has impacted this community as well. Joining us with more on that is our colleague, Alyssa Hahn. Alyssa?
Drew, I know you remember this. 2 years after Lindsay disappeared, the people in this town planted this crabapple tree in her honor. Tonight, they are returning here to pay their respects. They say her disappearance changed the city. 9 years ago, the disappearance of a young girl left a mark on the city.
It's upset a lot of people. It's just truly sad.
Just ask Tom Hawkins, who has lived here for 75 years.
What Lindsay Baum did for this community is what 9/11 did for the nation. It just took away our innocence.
Hawkins and other residents made their way to the community center today. Some people searched for the missing 10-year-old. Others had children in her class.
We've brought Lindsay home.
A few struggled to hold back tears when the sheriff shared the news.
It's sad and devastating that we didn't bring her home the way we all hoped.
She was my granddaughter's friend, and she's so precious.
On the street where she used to live, neighbors still remember Lindsay Baum and her brother.
They've walked up and down the road and all over the place, like countless times.
Nisi Smutka lives 2 doors down. She quietly held up hope all these years.
People were kind of thinking, well, maybe she ran off with friends or something like that or whatever, and I guess I was kind of still hoping that that's what she had done.
While hope in this community took a hard hit today, the people here are still resolved to finish what they started.
We found Lindsay. We'll find who did it. God is good. He won't leave us hanging.
One thing we heard about a lot today was sort of this lasting suspicion. Police searched so many homes, they questioned dozens of people, and neighbors really started to doubt each other, and they say that suspicion has been hard to shake. Reporting live in McClary, Alyssa Hahn, King 5 News.
There are some new developments tonight in the Lindsay Baum death investigation. You are looking at some Sky King video over an area in Kittitas County where law enforcement conducted a search today. This map shows the approximate location about 17 miles west of Ellensburg. Lindsay Baum was just 10 years old when she disappeared from the Grays Harbor County town of McClary nearly 9 years ago. Law enforcement announced during the week that hunters had found her remains in a remote part of eastern Washington. King 5's Ryan Takeo has the latest on today's search.
Some of the searchers are just now getting back to Ellensburg after a long day as they search for new evidence in the Lindsay Baum case. The Kittitas County Sheriff's Office helped organize today's large-scale canine search. They say there are 22 canine crews from across the state that helped with this search, with help from more than a dozen law enforcement agencies. The search was 17 miles west of Ellensburg in a really remote location where 2 hunters found the skeletal remains last fall. It wasn't until earlier this week results from the FBI came back confirming the remains belonged to Baum. who went missing in 2009 as a 10-year-old. The Kittitas County Undersheriff says there was a smaller search last fall, but this is the first time there's been a large-scale search this year because the snow in this remote area of the county just recently melted.
This was really the first opportunity to be able to get up in there and conduct a thorough search. It's kind of a tough area. There's a lot of activity up there, a lot of animal activity. It's rough terrain. It's pretty steep. It's heavily timbered. There are a lot of cliffs, rocks, deep ravines. It's popular with hunters. You know, the goal right now is twofold. One, it's to collect evidence for the criminal investigation, and two, it's to help bring closure to the family and the friends.
The undersheriff said he did not know if the crews had found anything because at the time of our interview, he said the search was still going on. In Ellensburg, I'm Ryan Takeo, King 5 News.
Heather Lynn Maud was last seen in Roseburg, Oregon on July 1st, 2009. She wasn't reported missing until August 10th. Maud had lived in the vicinity of Roseburg all of her life and was well known in the area. She was staying on North Bank Road and Old Melrose Road areas at the time of her disappearance. It's uncharacteristic of her to leave without warning. She usually kept in touch with her loved ones once a week. Maud associated with drug users, and foul play is suspected in her disappearance. Heather Maud was 26 years old, 5 feet 8 inches tall, and weighs 150 pounds. She has blonde hair and green eyes. She has the following tattoos: an unfinished tattoo of the name Brian and a butterfly on her left calf, a band of teardrops around her upper left arm, and the number 1 inside of a circle on her right hand. Few details are available in her case, and her case remains unsolved. Frederick Harrison Howard was last seen in the vicinity of DuPont Trail and Thane Campground in Juneau, Alaska on August 10, 2009. He has never been heard from again. Few details are available in his case. Frederick Howard was 47 years old, 5 feet 6 inches tall, and weighed 155 pounds. He had blonde hair and blue eyes. His case remains unsolved.
Tucked away in the rolling hills and dense forests of northwest Wisconsin is a landscape so beautiful you'd swear it was taken directly from a painting. But if you look close enough, there is a dark cloud lingering in the distance, a secret that these roads have held on to for far too long, a secret that has haunted Candace Hare in this community for 10 long years.
And it's horrible. It's hard to deal with. Very hard to deal with. And my life will never be normal without knowing where my daughter is.
On August 21st, 2009, Rose Marie Bly left her residence in St. Croix Falls, Wisconsin, believed to be en route to Cushing, just a short 6-mile drive to the east. The 21-year-old mother of 2 never made it. Days later, Bly's 2001 Pontiac Grand Am was found in the village of Grantsburg, nearly 17 miles north of her house, with no explanation as to how it got there. No one has seen or heard from her since. There hasn't been a day that has gone by when Candace Hare hasn't wondered where her youngest daughter is, or if she's okay.
With a missing child, there's a hole in your heart that can't be filled. And it's an impossible journey every day to wake up and wonder where she is. Just trying to figure out where my daughter is. It's horrible. It's not a good feeling. It's just, I wish I knew where she was.
My name is Brent Walk, and I'm the Polk County Sheriff.
When Rose Bly went missing, Brent Walk was a patrol sergeant with the Polk County Sheriff's Department. Now Sheriff, Walk and his office have made finding Bly a top priority. To date, the Sheriff's Department has investigated more than 200 tips and have interviewed more than 150 people. Still, the same question remains. Where is Rose Bly?
Well, I sympathize with the family of Rose because they want to know the answers, much like we do. And when these answers are largely unknown, that's very difficult to deal with. When you have to keep questioning what happened to Rose and where did she go, and certainly that is the solution we're looking for. We want to bring closure to this. 10 years, a decade, that's a lot of time. And you just look at what's changed in our lives and our careers yet alone this case is still out there, and we would like to bring conclusion to it.
10 years.
I tried to avoid this area. And I can't. It just draws me back. And I don't know why.
Years of worry and wondering. A full decade Rose's children have had to spend without their mother. Someone knows something. Someone has the key. Everyone agrees it's time for this mystery to be solved. It's time for Rose to come home.
Not sure which way, but she's out there somewhere. It's hard not to cry. Even just out here looking, it just brings tears to her eyes. Not knowing what actually really happened that day. Rosie, if you're out there, I still have the same number. I want to bring her home.
So I had one last question on this stuff that I'm looking at. Mm-hmm. Have you looked at the case of Tony Sharpless? It's another Philadelphia Camden case.
Yes, I have.
It's from 2009. It's not in the comparison searches or anything. I was just curious. Like, it's another one of those whodunits. It's got a bunch of nonsense attached to it where I can't tell what really happened there.
Oh, okay.
Supposedly a cop killed her or something. I was curious if you had a take on the Tony Sharpless case.
Well, I did, initially. Her car was not recovered. Is that correct?
It depends on if you believe the anonymous letter that came in. Supposedly it's not recovered. This is some guy pops up and has some information related to her cell phone and her VIN number and says that it was put in the chop shop and he got paid cash to dispose of it.
Okay, so her car has not been recovered. I mean, that's
right.
Not a legitimate recovery. I just meant, was it found? She was a nurse who was out with a friend who they went to somebody's house, and I'm telling you this from my memory. So her friend, somebody said something about her, and she got really upset about it. And so she didn't feel like her friend had defended her adequately, and she kicked her out of her car.
Yeah.
What was that argument about?
They were at one of the 76ers house parties.
But why were they arguing? Do you have any idea?
I think
the friend thought that it was not a big deal, and she was actually very surprised when they got in the car. She didn't think her friend was sober enough to drive, but she also didn't want to let her friend drive off by herself. So she gets in the car, and then the people that they were at the house of and partying with or whatever, they didn't know them very well. They had just recently met.
I think they showed their ass. Does that make sense?
Well, I think the girl did.
It is something that was uncouth for a party. She committed some kind of party foul.
The way that I remember the story going was the people in the house came out and said, you need to go get your friend. She's, lost her mind. So she goes in, and in fact, she felt like her friend had lost her mind. She had never seen her friend behave that way. And I believe she was bipolar. I don't really know that for sure, but she was acting like she, was having, as opposed to being just a jerk, she was having a mental issue. Whatever happened, they got in the car to leave. Her friend said she was not sober enough to drive, but she didn't want her friend leaving not sober enough to drive, so she got in the car, which is, I don't know what you do in that situation, but it came up right as they were leaving that, she should have defended her to those people and all this stuff. And she slams on the brakes, makes her friend get out of the car. The friend gets out of the car and she's standing there and she drives off. And she's like, okay, yeah, she's going to come back. My friend is not going to leave me here. They were friends from childhood. And they hadn't hung out a lot.
They
had
not talked in a long time. Right. Yeah.
Right. And so during the day they had gone out and done some stuff, and the friend had plans. And because, Tony, I don't know what had changed. I want to say she moved back home and maybe gotten out of rehab. I'm not sure. But something had changed. So, they were back in touch and they had gone shopping, and then the day went so well, the friend was like, hey, why don't you come with me to this club? And that's where they hooked up with the people that they ended up at the house of. And it was a very random situation. And what had happened that I found interesting, they sort of walked through the path she should have taken, and they found a place where it was possible she could have gone into the water.
Yeah, it was the boat ramps. They actually hired a firm to search the base. I have it written down that they found 13 cars in the water.
Okay, and so see, that is actually a perfect parallel to what I think we could come across in our situation. Having location searched, finding 13, none of which are what we assumed. Right. I immediately think that just like people don't disappear, vehicles even more so don't disappear. And I immediately think every time somebody's out, they get in a car, they're driving home and they vanished in the water. It makes the most sense. Now, we know she was incapacitated. Not incapacitated, but she was either intoxicated or she was having issues otherwise. And she wasn't thinking clearly because she left her friend on the side of the road. And her friend was surprised, just like I would be surprised if I was out with somebody that was really my friend and they left me somewhere. I'd be like, are you kidding? And they were grown-ups, I think. They were at least late 20s, right? And so I've always thought that I don't think she went in the water there where they searched. And I'm not sure where she would have went in because they found out that was the most logical place she would have gone in. But that didn't discount the fact that there are other places she could end up. There's been cases recently of missing people found in very little water, just enough to cover the vehicle, but murky enough that you can't see. And
there's one
it
on
sat there for
too.
It sat there for years. And, you think about that and a lot of cases, because it seems to me like when Keys messes with a vehicle, it gets found. Like it doesn't get found immediately, but it gets
burnout
found.
or something.
Well, in what he said in the interview was in one of the Washington boat cases, he moved a vehicle and he only moved it to put distance between them. He did not burn it up. He did not do anything except move it to put distance between him and the crime he had committed. So that's all we have from that. And see, to me, I immediately, when I started investigating this case, I looked into all those, but it's literally maybe just the one. I'm not saying he never did it again. I'm just saying he didn't allude to, cars never being found. But my theory on, where he got his victims is that the car didn't come into play. Like there may have been a vehicle somewhere, but he didn't have any idea where it was. And it was found, but he had never been to the vehicle.
Our next Unsolved in PA focuses on the missing persons case of Tony Sharpless. She went missing back in 2009 after a night out in Philadelphia.
7 years later, her family and police still have no idea what happened to her or where she is. And she used to work right in Lancaster. CBS 21's Courtney Highfield joins us with more on where the case stands now and what's the latest. Courtney.
Well, Joldy and Lara, it's been 7 years since anyone has heard from or seen Tony Sharpless. And to this day, her car has never been found either. Her family says it's been far too long. And at this point, they just need some closure.
Where is she at this point? I just need to know.
August 22nd, 2009, Tony Lee Sharpless, a 29-year-old single mother, went out with a friend for what was supposed to be a night of fun.
She said that night to me and my husband, "Do you guys mind if I go out? Can Dahlia stay here? I haven't been out in 2 years."
August 23rd, Sharpless was reported missing.
DNA forms. You live and your whole thing is in just one file.
For her to call that many times made me feel like something was wrong, so I called her as soon as I woke up that morning.
That was one of the original pictures I was given.
Sharpless was with her friend Crystal Johns. According to police, the two left a nightclub in Philadelphia and went to a house party here on Beaubarn Drive in Gladwine. Police say there was a disagreement and the two were asked to leave.
According to Crystal, Tony went out of control.
Then Crystal and Tony got into a disagreement of their own.
Tony got into an argument with Miss Johns, and Miss Johns was then thrown out of the vehicle.
Police say that's the last time Sharpless was seen.
My granddaughter came into my bedroom around 4 o'clock, and she said, "I can't sleep. Mommy texted me, she'll be home soon."
And that's the last time anyone heard from her.
And said, "Your mom's missing, hon, but we'll find her." And she started crying. And I said, "Don't worry, we'll find her."
The next day, Tony's sister and friends searched by themselves, but they couldn't find her.
And by nighttime, when we heard nothing, then at that point, I went to the West Brandywine Township Police Department and filed a missing persons report.
The police subpoenaed her credit records, her bank statements, her phone statements, and pinged her cell phone.
We did find out that the phone stopped working or was turned off soon after she had dropped Miss Johns off.
Police say there was money left in Sharpless's bank account when she went missing. Her family says that's a sign she didn't take off on her own free will.
These are all the hits that I've gone through and verified that they're not Tony Sharpless.
Police say for several weeks there were multiple sightings of Tony. One of her license plates.
See, it's pretty thick. A couple of sightings were in Montgomery County. A couple of sightings were in Philadelphia. We had what was called an automatic license plate reader read numerics of her license plate in Camden.
The biggest cluster has been in Camden.
Over the years, the private detective on the case says there have been more sightings in those areas and in Lancaster, where she worked at Lancaster General as a nurse.
Every single one of them I go through.
The tips have slowed down, but still trickle in occasionally. One of the tips, this anonymous letter. The person who wrote it says they were paid to move Tony's car out of Camden, New Jersey. The letter says a friend of the person who paid him to move the car got into a fight with a girl, and the girl died. Police say they were sent the letter too. They investigated and determined it was a prank.
I can't believe that people would do this. We've had at least 2 pranks that I know of. One of them pretending to be a sheriff.
The private detective was told it was a prank, but says she still feels like someone is trying to tell them something. Tony's family says it might not be the person who wrote the letter, but they know someone knows where she is.
If it was their family, then they would want to know, and they would want closure.
Law says she's going to find answers for this family.
If it's the last breath I take, that's what I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing to find her.
The family says those answers are all they want.
I know for a fact somebody knows something. What happened, I really don't care. I just need her to be found to bring us peace and closure.
And guys, if anyone watching has any information, the family is asking that you call their private detective or the West Brandywine Township Police Department.
Just heartbreaking stuff here.
Yeah.
But you know, Courtney, as you've said before, I mean, this has been investigated for years.
Right.
So what makes police think that people might come forward now after all this time?
So the thing is, you know, you never know when someone's going to be watching or if they're watching this now. And police are really just hoping by keeping the story out there and keeping the word out that eventually someone has to come forward.
Something might click.
Right.
Yeah.
And you see how heartbroken that family is. It must be awful for them to still be going through all of this.
Yeah, like they said, they really just need peace at this point.
Yeah, closure. All right, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Courtney.
It's a small-town mystery so gruesome it gripped the entire state. A dedicated pastor's mutilated body found in the sanctuary of her church.
And 9 investigates why. 9 years later, the case remains unsolved. New tonight, our Lisa Monahan gives us a first look at the evidence.
She was here to minister to the people. The Christ Holy Sanctified Church seemed like the perfect place for Carol Daniels to minister to lost souls. There were no regular services, still Reverend Daniels would make the 60-mile drive from Oklahoma City every Sunday, eager to serve and hopefully save. But on August 23, 2009, Retired Bishop Silky Wilson Jr. knew something wasn't right.
We couldn't get no attention. Nobody would come to the door.
An officer arrived, looked in through the open side door, and immediately called for backup.
The inflection in his voice, I knew something was wrong.
Anadarko detective James Howard is still haunted by the sight of Pastor Daniel's brutalized body behind the pulpit.
In your mind, you think, well, how could anybody do this to another person, much less, someone that's down there serving God?
Daniels had been stabbed multiple times, her head nearly severed, her hair set on fire, and her nude body posed, some say, as if on a crucifix.
There's several theories involved.
District Attorney Jason Hicks says investigators eventually agreed it was a foiled robbery, where the suspects, likely looking for drug money, took something more valuable, forensic evidence.
Her clothes have never been recovered. The murder weapon has never been recovered.
No.
Investigators say only this never-before-aired surveillance video seems to provide evidence of something suspicious. A blurry figure wearing all white, and plenty of potential witnesses.
You would hear the scuttlebutt around town that we know who did this and we know it was these two people.
The two in question were violent drug dealers. People were simply too afraid to come forward. Finally, in 2015, a woman offered a potential break.
She actually witnessed suspect number 2 with black blouse, a knife that had blood on it.
Hicks says the woman claimed the evidence had been burned in this shed. But not only did the search come up empty, the woman died a few days later. Investigators pressed the suspects.
Did you participate in the killing of Daniels?
No. Neither confessed, and in 2017, the multi-county grand jury took up the case. But then another setback. The main suspect, Denise Darnell Cooper, died of cancer before grand jurors could hear her testimony.
I knew what it meant. We would not have an indictment, and it meant most likely we were going to have to find another avenue if we wanted to prosecute suspect number 2.
Other possible witnesses were called, including then-prisoner Kevin Mahan, but he also offered nothing of value, leaving Hicks and all those who loved Carol Daniels still searching for justice.
Do you think this case will be solved?
I look at it this way. It's solved. My question is, are we ever going to be able to bring it to justice? And I'm not going to stop trying until I get it there.
On the scene on the story, Lisa Monahan, News 9.
Interesting to hear from the district attorney there. And you can read about the investigation and rewatch Lisa's report to see that evidence one more time on the News 9.
There was a little cluster over in Washington that I looked at, 3 missing persons in a row, the October time. And I was looking at Washington and Oregon, and I looked at California. And the reason I looked at them was to see, would he drive anybody across country? Because I was wondering if the Jameson family thing might have been witnesses, because that case was so up in the air. I'm not saying it's even remotely connected. I'm just saying I looked at that. And I looked at Robert Shaw and Brock Holmes and Galena Brown over in Washington and Oregon, this Kentucky case, which was Janet Stevens Brown. That case had caught my interest. And what I ended on, there was this case in California, another one of those cases where sort of assumed something happened and the people haven't resurfaced at this point. But that case was a little girl. It was a little girl and her mom. So the idea was this 9-year-old girl, her name was Marlene, had been abducted by her mom, Angelica, down in California. And everybody just assumed, they went to Guadalajara. And they don't. That's it. It just drops off. It ends there. Well, now we're on 10, 11, 12 years later. Somebody should be popping back up because that's one of the patterns we looked for. But in this case, again, it didn't. And also, they weren't even in any national database at that point in time. It was much, much later that felony warrants and NCIC stuff get filed. So it wasn't at the time that if he went hunting for them, he wouldn't find them. He wouldn't find Marlene and he wouldn't find Angelique anywhere. They're not mentioned in the news. There's not much of anything about their cases.
A family of 3 mysteriously vanishes into thin mountain air.
Their beliefs were a little unorthodox.
And the circumstances surrounding the puzzling disappearance of Bobby, Sherilyn, and 6-year-old Madison Jameson just before Halloween scares their family.
She knew things about witchcraft.
Sherilyn and Bobby believed that there were spirits in them, in their house, and it frightened them.
But could their haunted house actually have scared the Jamesons to death? Sherilyn Jameson was known to dabble in the world of the supernatural. On a container near her home, she scrawled graffiti about witches and black cats.
She did tell me that one time she had cast demons out of someone.
When she couldn't cast out the spirits inhabiting the family's house in the little town of Eufaula, Oklahoma, Sherilyn's mother, Connie, says the family decided to move.
Sherilyn told me that they had plans to buy a piece of land in the mountains.
Now the remote San Boys Mountains, about 30 miles away, hold all the dark secrets. It's where the couple was heading with their young daughter the day they disappeared.
They didn't want to be around a lot of people. I think they just needed solitude.
But when relatives discovered they hadn't returned after 4 days, they started to panic.
All I could think of is, what happened to him? What happened to him?
Sherilyn's mother immediately feared the worst.
When I first heard the news that morning, I felt in my heart that Sherilyn and Bobby and Madison had been killed.
Former Latimer County Sheriff Israel Beecham was optimistic the Jamesons would be found alive.
I didn't want to overreact, so I just assumed they were camping. Maybe they were lost.
But after 7 days and counting, nagging suspicion became a resounding alarm. Then on the 8th day, a distressing discovery. The Jamesons' truck is found by a local hunter with the family dog alive and trapped inside.
I can't imagine him leaving her in the car at all. Leaving their coats in the car, their phones, the GPS, the cameras. It just doesn't make any sense why they would just get up and walk up the mountain without anything.
After finding the abandoned truck, Sheriff Beecham ramped up the search for the family.
The search efforts is one of the largest Oklahoma's ever had before. We had 1,000 volunteers, over 13 dog teams. We used a plane, UAVs, helicopters.
The hunt for the Jameson family intensified, and the mystery grew after deputies combed through their truck and found disturbing clues hidden inside. Angry letters, a cell phone photo of Madison taken the day the family disappeared, empty pill bottles, and $32,000 in cash.
The money was in a Ziploc bag inside the bank bag.
And he had buried it down underneath all of his tools. And he didn't expect anybody to find it.
The large amount of cash fueled speculation that illegal drug activity was responsible for the family's disappearance.
We know that they were on prescription pills, and when we say drugs, that does not mean that it was methamphetamine, marijuana, cocaine. It could have been just prescription pills.
Empty pill bottles were found in the truck, but no other evidence of drugs was found in their home or car. Bobby took pain pills for back injuries. Also in the truck, investigators found disturbing letters.
I will say that there was problems. That, in the very beginning, gave us a lot of concern.
Sherilyn's own handwritten notes revealed she was frustrated with her husband.
I would not wish my daughter to be raised in foster care because of you being in prison for attempted murder and her mother dead.
The cops wondered if she had the motive to want him dead.
They did have some disagreements on things, but, you know, all marriages do. I don't think she meant all those things.
Perhaps Sherilyn, or someone she was involved with, made the family disappear.
They were just abnormal individuals. You know, we couldn't get rid of the idea that, hey, you know, maybe they just didn't want to be found.
Did the Jamesons simply go off the grid and start a new life, leaving their beloved dog and a large amount of cash behind? Or did someone want to erase any trace of the Jameson family?
I do think that they must have seen something they shouldn't have seen, because nothing else makes sense.
For years, the search for the Jamesons continued despite the difficult terrain.
It took us almost 9 months to complete. Many miles were covered. It just wasn't inch by inch. It was impossible because of the mountains, the trees, the vegetation.
So cops started taking a closer look at the Jamesons' life, and they found troubling footage on the home security cameras on the day the family vanished.
It took them an extremely long time to load the truck. They made 30, 40 trips, it seemed like. They changed clothes several times.
The sheriff called in a psychologist to analyze their bizarre behavior.
The psychologist watched them going back and forth and automatically told me drugs. They were taking things that they'd put in the truck and putting them back in the house and then taking them back from the house and putting them back into the truck. They never interacted with each other the entire time they were doing it.
Bobby's mother insists he only took prescribed medication for back pain.
I've seen Bobby before, just kind of in a daze because of the medicine that he took. It's not drugs. They didn't find any drugs at the house. They didn't find any drugs on the pickup.
U.S. Marshals also investigated a boarder who had lived with the Jamesons. Sherilyn had run him off with a gun just months before they disappeared.
They had some words about it, and she started to get scared and made him leave at gunpoint. He was actually in jail during the times that they had went missing.
But Sherilyn's gun was never found. As the clues and possibilities diminished and the years went by without any sign of the family, Sherilyn's mother says she assumed the worst.
I think they were murdered. They run across somebody that didn't want them to be on their land, or somebody was doing something bad and they didn't want them to see it.
One day, 4 years after the Jamesons vanished, the mountain finally gave up its secrets. Human remains were found just 3 miles from where the family abandoned their truck.
I can't imagine anybody killing a 6-year-old girl. In my further imagination, I can't see that happening. How can somebody do that?
The partial remains of 3 skeletons found in the mountains were so decomposed, it took 8 months to confirm it was the Jamesons. Rumors swirled again about criminals, drugs, or that the Jamesons died by murder-suicide.
Who's gonna walk 2-3 miles and then do a murder-suicide in such rough terrain when you got a 6-year-old and a hurt back?
But investigators never found any physical evidence that offered proof.
If there was a murder-suicide, then they'd found a weapon.
Family members are sure it's not possible they simply got lost.
They were in danger, definitely in danger. They left the dog in the truck, and they wouldn't have ever done that because that's Madison's best friend.
The former sheriff also believes the Jamesons were murdered.
Bobby didn't get around very well at all. In my opinion, it's down to homicide. Now that the bodies have been found, obviously they didn't go missing at their own will.
It's a case that still haunts him, even though he's since left the department.
My daughter at the time was the exact same age as Madison. So I took that personally. It's a horrible crime, and I want it solved. And I don't think that I'll ever quit thinking about it until it is solved. Even then,
it's so hard. Bobby was my only son, and Madison was my only granddaughter. I want to know what happened.
Halima Sharma-Reese was last seen on October 30th, 2009, in Granger, Utah. Few details are available in her case. Halima was 14 years old, 5 feet 5 inches tall, and weighed 120 pounds. She has black hair and black eyes. She was last seen wearing black jeans and a white and yellow shirt. Her case remains unsolved. Amber Cherie Weaver was last seen in Coors Code, California on December 9, 2009. She's never been heard from again, but she is missing under suspicious circumstances, and few details are available in her case. Amber Weaver was 31 years old, 5 feet 4 inches tall, and weighed 120 pounds. She had sandy brown hair and brown eyes. She has a tattoo of the phrase, "Crazy in Love with Doug," on her lower back. Her case remains unsolved.
A young Mormon goes missing, vanishing without a trace. His car abandoned in a Henderson retirement community.
A home surveillance system captures the last time he was seen. That was almost a decade ago. Newsweek's Kelsey Thomas made the trip to his hometown in Utah, still desperate for answers for her special report, Searching for Stephen.
But These are cards, you know, we're thinking about you, we love you, we wish we could help you. Look at that. I just can't even look anymore.
Their words Deanne Kosher could have never expected. After nearly a decade, cards and newspaper articles about her missing son sit frozen in time.
It starts out, it says, I know at times like this, taking one day at a time can be a pretty tall order. Maybe it will help to know we are thinking of you.
December 13th, 2009, Stephen Kosher vanished from his home in St. George, Utah. That same day, his car is found abandoned 140 miles away in Henderson on a cul-de-sac in Sun City, Anthem.
It was absolutely devastating. I knew that was horrible news.
Dallin Kosher is Stephen's younger brother.
We knocked on all the doors. We had pictures of Stephen. We said, have you seen this person? Have you seen this person? And no one had seen him.
Stephen was a devout member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The second oldest of 5 kids, he was struggling.
He was a college graduate. He couldn't seem to find the job that matched his personality.
As days go by, I start thinking about suicide. Thinking, he was pretty in a rough state of his life,
But clues in Stephen's car made Dallin believe his brother was still alive.
We see Christmas presents in the car. So somebody who is thinking about this, in my mind, isn't trying to disappear.
Then the last images of his brother, captured by a home surveillance system in Henderson, walking away from his car.
This person walks with purpose, right?
Something tucked under his left arm.
What was that reason why he was there?
Stephen walks off camera and out of their lives.
Why would you be going to Henderson, Nevada on a Sunday at noon?
With no connection to Henderson, it's a clue that baffles St. George Police Detective Adam Olmstead.
We know about as much now as we knew the second we realized he was gone. In the time that I was handling the missing persons cases here in St. George, it's the only one that I haven't been able to locate. And so that sticks with me.
Olmstead says hours after Stephen walks off camera, his cell phone was used. A quick call to voicemail. No one can explain.
Why? Where? What got you there? What happened? There's a lot, but the one question is, are you comfortable? Are you safe? Are you at peace?
Then there are those cards and news articles, something solid for Deanne to hold on to.
If you stop and look at this stuff, it just thinks, how could this possibly be what we're doing?
Words this family never expected as they try to answer the question, what happened to Stephen?
We're stuck between hope and grief because we want to hope for the best, but we can't grieve because we don't know what's happened.
Kelsey Thomas, News 3.
So in February of 2009, you had the discovery of the West Mesa Boneyard. And I looked at that from a couple different angles and read up on the cases. I've heard different names linked to that. A couple of things about that. One, somebody was talking about that being sort of the perfect serial killer. It's not the perfect serial killer. I understand where that idea comes from, but the perfect serial killer doesn't commit the same murder or anything that's linked to it twice, or their bodies are never found. Either way. What struck me about West Mesa was I don't think it's serial killing at all. I mean, I guess it could be. I guess it could be one guy operating, but that struck me as an organization. That struck me as this is the cemetery for the people who didn't make it. Whatever thing was happening, that was not serial killing as much as it was sort of a potter's field for bad things happening. I I mean, I could be totally wrong. And, it could be a mix of the two. It could be that, like, there was someone within an organization. That's how they disposed of people. But that's not going to be this guy. So I don't think it's going to be one guy overall. I definitely think they're linked. I just don't think they're linked the way people allude to them being linked.
I went back through looking in Canada in 2008 and 2009 when I was researching the 2009 cases. And I found a couple that were interesting. It's funny because I ended up covering this case. Like, I covered 2 months of this case ad nauseum. Those, like, the surrounding time with Deborah Feldman ad nauseum for this year. And then I go back and I have to, like, recover it. Like, okay, so what happened when Deborah Feldman wasn't there? So this is the year of the Tulare Lake bank robbery. And this is the year that sort of indicates it might be his first known victim as far as, him talking about it. It was not as hard as the other years because you have a lot more information now. There's a lot more things that you can rule out.
10 years later, and another dead end, this in the search for Susan Powell. Now, she disappeared back in 2009, likely murdered by her husband, Josh Powell. He killed their 2 children before taking his own life. But where are Susan's remains? Now, a decade later, and it's still a big mystery. Behind every crime, there's a story, and the truth matters. Here's ABC4 senior crime and punishment correspondent Markoff with tonight's Justice Files.
This latest effort to find the remains of Susan Powell was done in May. The Utah Cold Case Coalition sent a camera deep into a mine shaft. Now, for the first time, you'll see what their camera saw that day.
This one was the one where it was kind of in a logical place.
Where Josh Powell had been seen.
It was kind of where he had reported going and where he'd been seen by the sheep herders.
Back in 2009, Susan Cox Powell disappeared, and from the outset, her husband became a suspect, but police could never link him to her disappearance. She's never been found. That's why in May, the Utah Cold Case Coalition chose a certain mine shaft near Simpson Springs. 9 years ago, another group announced that they were going to target this same mine shaft and look inside. But on the eve of the search, something happened.
They come back the next morning and the head frame has been burnt to the ground, and the debris dropped inside the mine.
Josh Powell was still around, but in 2012, he'd moved to Washington State, where he set his home on fire. He murdered their 2 children, took his own life as the home burned.
Obviously, we wanted to bring closure to her family.
Chuck and Judy Cox have never given up hope that Susan would one day be found. Police had visually searched this same mine shaft before, but back then, these types of cameras weren't around.
We wanted to drop a GoPro camera past that point to see if there was something that would identify the likelihood that somebody had been disposed down there.
It wasn't easy to get the camera through debris that had blocked police flashlights in previous searches, but the camera found a seam and continued its downward search. The camera reached depths of 150 feet before ending its search. Since May, the Cold Case Coalition analyzed it frame by frame.
Even though 10 years later nearly, where you're going to have some settlement debris and everything like that, it was pretty conclusive, though there was nothing there.
This mine shaft, once considered suspicious, is no longer that. But there's hundreds more still waiting to be searched, and their efforts haven't gone unnoticed.
I'm glad people are still looking, still care, and want to search for her, and that's probably how she's going to be found sometime.
He means that someone might accidentally come across the remains of Susan Powell. But then again, he's not sure if her remains are in one place. He says police found an axe, a pick, and a shovel in the trunk of Josh Powell's car. He says it's quite possible that her remains are scattered in several places. For the Justice Files, Marcus Ortiz, ABC4 News.
And by no means am I suggesting he had anything to do with Susan Powell. But what the searches show us is 3 things. His victims, his body disposal sites, and that he's obsessed with missing persons. So anything that he's read in the news, he looks it up too. Whether he's looking up just news articles or he's actually hunting out the profiles or whatever, that's what he's doing. So just playing semantics for a minute. What if the bank robbery was first? Because we already covered the Deborah Feldman thing. He says on that trip. He never specifies when or where or whatever. He describes the East Coast victim. Just because we're in 2009 again, I'm going to bring this up. And then I'm just going to eat it and move on. Because when I first looked at it, I ruled it out because I thought I knew the solution to this case. But when I look at the solution to this case, it's a real similar thing to some of the other cases we've seen where there's all these rumors and innuendo and like such and such saw this person do this and do that. I don't necessarily believe this case, like the way that like people think it went down. So that's why I'm mentioning it here. He did search around in the area where this like person went missing. And this case also made me think a different thing. What if the big missing person cases, what if the key is not that they're in the comparison searches? What if like prior to 2011, it's the ones that aren't in the comparison searches that we should be looking at? Like that would be an important factor, right?
Tonight, the mother of Brittany Drexel is hoping that a new lead could help investigators find her daughter's remains a decade after she went missing from Myrtle Beach.
A prison informant claims Drexel was killed and buried in Jacksonboro, a town in Colleton County. She disappeared during a spring break trip in the Grand Strand back in 2009 and now is thought to be dead.
Our police reporter Harv Jacobs tells us the FBI is looking into that inmate's claim.
These are photos of the property and abandoned trailer in Jacksonboro in Colleton County that may soon become the focus of the Brittany Drexel investigation. Jail informant Taquan Brown reportedly has told the FBI that Brittany Drexel was shot and killed there. Brown's uncle, who died in 2016, owns the property. FBI spokesman Don Wood confirmed today that the agency has spoken to Brown and recently looked at the property. Today, Drexel's mom, another family member, and a former police investigator went to the Colleton County Sheriff's Office to ask them to search the trailer and the surrounding land along with the FBI.
My thoughts on it is something needs to be done, and it needs to be done right away. We can't wait.
Investigators previously concentrated their search for Drexel at a stash house near McClellanville. Brown reportedly told the FBI she was moved from McClellanville to Jacksonboro. There he said he witnessed Drexel being shot to death and then buried on his uncle's property.
I feel like there is some truth to what he's saying, and every lead has to be looked into. We just marked Brittany's 10-year anniversary. I was like, well, someone needs to get out there right away.
For Plekin, it has been a rough 10 years, not knowing what has happened to her daughter.
I'm hoping for a break in the case. I'm tired. You know, I'm very tired, but I'm also very frustrated. I want my daughter found. I'm hoping that we can get some sort of remains so that I'm able to bring her home and we can finally lay her to rest.
In Walterboro, Harv Jacobs, Live 5 News.
Plekin says her priority is to find her daughter's remains and then bring the killers to justice.
And that wraps up 2009 for the second time, without really discussing the Tupper Lake bank robbery and Deborah Feldman. But as usual, there's always one more thing. And one of the things I had to remember in 2009 with the Lindsay Baum case was that the killer might have talked about her case specifically.
So Ellensburg comes up, Lindsay Baum. One of the things Meg had done after like the Ellensburg with the Washington agents thing, because he asked which district it was in, and it's out by a location. Although partial remains were found, we had a theory. I had a theory. We talked about a theory. How's that? But Meg sent me a side-by-side on a bunch of these girls, just like threw them out there. And I know it isn't like they're all random chance or whatever, but there were 3 or 4 of them. When you put them side by side, they are so similar looking that we started to wonder if that was the preference for a little bit. I did, but it was eerie how similar these girls looked.
Talk about, but depending on things, you know, the way things pan out, you know, the things we've already talked about, then I may need those details of the Washington cases that that I would be better served to wait, if that's where the route I have to go. I mean, if you know what I mean, it's.
I think I do. I'm not sure. I know we talked a little bit about.
Because there's a big difference between state and federal, it seems, and it seems like Washington might be a state that.
But that's something that we can sort of start working on in the background, just so you know. I mean, I'm not asking you, here now today, but that's something that usually does require cooperation between even the federal districts, even if they're state things.
So you're saying there's two districts
in Washington.
Federal districts?
Yeah. So there's two federal districts that we probably just sort of broach with it. One in Spokane and Yakima are the main offices in the one, and then Seattle and Tacoma are the Western District. So that's just the dividing line. I don't know exactly where it is, but pretty much, Seattle and Tacoma is where most of the crimes are. Everything.
Like Ellensburg, or?
Yeah, I think that's Ellensburg is.
Ellensburg is west or east?
No, east. East. Ellensburg is sort of outside of Yakima. Right?
You're going to need both districts then. Because I don't. Yeah.
Well, it's something. I mean, the good thing about Washington is we have some, pretty good relationships with both U.S. attorneys there, and both criminal chiefs. So.
No, I understand what you're saying, but that was a few years ago. So, but no, it just seems like I might end up having to talk to state people there. I don't know.
I don't know either, but I mean the good thing is the federal people have their counterparts. Like Vermont was pretty connected with the Chittenden County folks.
Right.
We can sort of get them on board and makes the transition easier. Sort of move forward in their jurisdiction if that's the way you choose to go. Obviously, everybody would have to be on board anyway.
Right.
So it's useful for him to sort of give them a heads up.
And I think, Frank can correct me if I'm wrong, obviously, but I think the sooner that they have that opportunity, the less likely you are to kind of get drugged from one jurisdiction to another, because there'll already be things in place.
Yeah. No, my concern at this point is not knowing, like I say, how current things are going to pan out. The information that I still have could come in handy if I need it. And if I give it out now, I don't think I'll need it in that respect, but you never know. I don't know what's going to happen, and if I give it all out now, particularly anything about Washington, that could seriously compromise my options, future options.
I think and I can sort of bring that back into you at some point. Obviously, we can take this stack.
Thanks for joining us. You can reach us at 252-365-5593 or at truecrimexcess.com or truecrimexcess@gmail.com if you want to send us a note. This episode was brought to you by LabrottieCreations.com. That's LabrottieCreations.com. Check out the merchandise and specifically their fun Pop Pet art custom pieces made from photos of your very own pets. Use the promo code CRIMEXS, that's CRIMEXS, for 20% off a fun, brightly colored, happy piece of art of your own pet at their site, at BrodyCreations.com. Music in this episode was licensed for True Crime XS. The theme song was Indestructible by Noah Smith. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform or at TeePublic, Instagram, or Twitter. You can also join us on Patreon to fund future body exploration trips. But the best thing you can do for us is leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform and share us with your friends. And don't forget, on July 3rd, we are literally revealing where the bodies are buried. See you next week.
This is True Crime XS.
I have two questions. And my first question is, with cases like this where we run across them, is it your opinion that like once the location's revealed, like cases like this will either be or not be? Does that make sense? People will either look in the location there or they won't. It's a location that like should pop up on everybody's radar. Does that make sense?
Correct.
When you look at the Army Corps listings, it's on there. This location that I'm thinking of for this thing that started this conversation today. It's there. It's like it's marked. It's like.
Oh yeah. Well, there'll either be something there or it won't. Are you talking? But who are you?
I'm just referencing like Berg 2009 cases. You know, I developed a Wisconsin thing, and then I developed a Virginia. I don't have to do anything with these cases, right? I just leave that out there. They don't need to be on some secret list somewhere that we keep. That just once the locations are made, that goes out. And like, don't you think somebody will either take that over or they won't?
It depends. Okay, well, let me ask you this, and then I'll kind of elaborate. Do you feel like there's legitimacy there, or are you just going on what is close by? Because I'm pretty sure that, and don't get me wrong, this isn't a bad thing, but I'm pretty sure you could find something close enough to just about every case out there. I mean, and my point, so here's my point. If we make a couple of compelling cases, okay, if we make compelling cases that turn out to actually be something, I do think every single place will be searched. If we don't, okay, I do not think every single place will be searched.
So what's unique about this is there are, in the entire U.S., and I'm not exaggerating, 14 locations total that have a double homicide in the crime span in this time period within proximity to the location. And by proximity, I mean under a half a mile. There's 14 locations that have a double homicide. There's one.
Why did you come to that, the half a mile thing?
I wasn't looking for that. What I was looking for there was this rabbit hole that I went down was I pulled up Alaska, Washington, Oregon, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. Missing people, murder within eye shot of one of these locations.
Right, which I immediately say that is not the case. Like, that's not him.
Okay, well.
But why? Why would you think it was, is what I'm saying.
Because of the statement, I'm not going to find any witnesses. I heard that early, and that's what led me to Bumblebee. That's where this all came to a head for me when I started. I was like, I wonder what that was, because I only looked at cases where people could just be minding their business. For instance, if you go all the way back to 2004, the Cutshaw Allen murders were not, and they've solved that 3 or 4 times. I'm not going to belabor that at this point. I'm just saying there's a location right there. It makes sense that that location should be there. Is it him? Probably not. But it's there. It's like that one just happens to be within 100 yards. So I don't think to myself, that was his murder. I think to myself, those were his witnesses. That is all I did. I wasn't looking to expand the list or anything. These have come up naturally in the course of going, all right, what's nearby?
it's not a person from that area at the location that he took there whenever it pops up.
Hmm.
It's him taking someone from, and it's not always over state lines.
Okay, I understand what you're saying now. You're saying that he's disposing of another victim and he kills these witnesses. That's what
Right.
you're saying.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's a pop execution that makes no sense to be an execution, whether it's a single person or a double homicide. They started catching my eye, not because I was looking for him. I was looking in the time and the place and the location that I thought he would have gone to. I just sort of naturally progressed from there. And I was like, wait a second. You know, there's a double homicide at that location that I think is for this other person.
Right.
And so what I am saying on these cases is I can't cover them all, first of all. Second of all, when it comes to them, you and I can just know that I suspect this, right? And we don't that's not a thing I have to
I mean, you can write it all down and we could have it and everything, but I don't see, and your theory makes sense. Like when you just explained it to me, I get what you're saying. However, I feel like Keyes was too paranoid to do something consistent like that.
But
like
the paranoia is what makes that happen.
Right, but okay, please, I mean, I don't know, but don't you think law enforcement could have connected those things?
I don't know. That's why
Okay, and so in my mind, Keyes would think they could, right? And so he would be less inclined to, I can't imagine that they wouldn't have gone in with his initial victim. You see what I'm saying?
Well, then we're back to
he
the
might have
story.
shot him, but they would have been back in there.
Well,
but they weren't left out in the middle of the woods. I mean, they were in bags in a basement, and he had a good sense of what was going to happen.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying it out loud.
And so my opinion would be go ahead and, see that theory through and you can have your pile of that situation. I don't think I would lead with that. And, I'm not, and this isn't being critical. This is being just, honest and practical.
So I'm done with 2008. I'm in 2009.
Okay.
I've got 5 cases in one weekend that I need you to explain to me. And I want to tell you, and the results can be later, but I'm at a wall here. So, and I looked at these before, and something just clicked for me. I had one of those moments where you wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's like, wait a second. Something you said was...
I have no idea what you're talking about. I have those moments all the time. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So you said something to me the other day, and it got me to thinking, and I made this map. It doesn't really matter about the map, but you said, I didn't know Kayla Berg was in was in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
So when you said that, I was like, that case makes no sense. And I went back and I looked at it. Here's the craziest fucking thing. What if I told you that there was another missing Berg from August 22nd, 2009, where Kayla Berg is August 11th, 2009? Reston, Virginia. There's a family.
Mm-hmm.
2 kids and a mom go missing. On August 27th, they go poof. Mm-hmm. And now they should have resurfaced. If it's what it was purported to be, they should have resurfaced by now. They should have showed up with facial recognition. Something should have happened. Then, down in Strawberry Fields, there's a double homicide. It looks like a witness homicide. That's 2 hours south and east of Reston. It's one of those blind spots in all of the timeline. But what I can't figure out is how to confirm what happened to the Berg family. Because it's weird. There's papers filed on this case a year and a half later. They're looking for her on a warrant, and they never find her. The FBI takes it, Japan takes it. Nobody ever finds this woman. They actually start looking for her and declaring it a parental abduction in 2009, in October 2009.
but nothing surfaces ever.
Right.
And I'm digging through it. So those kids get shot, and that's going to be Heidi Childs and David Metzler. They get shot at this area called Caldwell Fields, but it's a camping area. There's locations there, but like, how do I make all of that story not be a rabbit hole? What would you do there?
Well, it's not a rabbit hole.
Kiana Joanne Berg and her brother Gunnar disappeared from Fairfax, Virginia on August 22, 2009. They are thought to have been abducted by their non-custodial mother, Nako Numakami. A felony warrant for kidnapping was issued for her on October 15th of 2010. Numakami was 40 years old at the time of the children's abductions. She's described as 5 feet 4 inches tall and 135 pounds, with black hair and brown eyes. She sometimes uses the last name, Berg. Numakami allegedly took Gunnar and Kiana to Japan, telling their father that it was just for vacation. She then has refused to return them. Douglas has not had any contact with the children since the time of their abductions, but he believes they are still in Japan. Kiana Berg was 8 years old, 4 feet 6 inches tall, and weighed 60 pounds. She has brown hair and brown eyes. Gunnar David Berg was 9 years old, also 4 feet 6 inches tall, and weighed 60 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes. Gunnar, Kiana, and Nako's cases remain unsolved.
This month marks a heartbreaking anniversary for these parents. 10 years ago, sweethearts Heidi Childs and David Metzler were found slain in a national park. Their killer has never been caught. At a news conference today, Laura Childs choked up as she and her husband spoke about their daughter.
She never got to finish college or fulfill her dreams of becoming a physician's assistant.
The slain girl's sisters stood by, fighting to contain their emotions. David Metzler's parents were also there. He was their only son.
We will never know what it's like to see a son take a bride, and we will never gain a daughter-in-law.
18-year-old Heidi and 19-year-old David were sophomores at prestigious Virginia Tech. On August 26, 2009, they drove to Jefferson National Forest and parked at a scenic spot, which David had previously visited on a Christian retreat.
He wanted Heidi to see for herself the beauty and the tranquil setting of that area at the National Forest.
Their bodies were found the next day by a man walking his dog. Both had been shot with a high-powered rifle at point-blank range. Heidi and David are buried side by side. At today's news conference, the parents joined police and the FBI in asking for new information that could help finally find the killer a decade later.
It's hard to believe that this type of person, a cold-hearted, merciless murderer, is walking around right now, maybe not too far from here.
Investigators release new details in a local unsolved murder case. Good evening once again. I'm Karen McNew. Jay has the night off. It was 2.5 years ago when Heidi Childs and David Metzler, both Virginia Tech students, were found shot to death here in Montgomery County at Caldwell Fields. Police have received hundreds of leads in this case and have offered a reward, but so far there have been no arrests. Today, though, investigators offered up more information during a news conference. 10 on Your Side's Aaron Barnett was there and joins us live to go over some of those details. Aaron, some may be questioning why now, and there certainly is a lot of new information out in this case today.
Yeah, Karen, that's a question we asked today. Investigators aren't answering it at this time. In fact, they didn't take any questions following the press conference, but we are learning much more about those details in the investigation, including the murder weapon, which they say was a .30 caliber rifle, and that they do have DNA in this case. Now, Sheriff Witt says investigators have been focusing on collecting DNA samples from people who live nearby and people who are often in that area. They say so far all those people have cooperated with them, but they wouldn't go on to say much more than that. They also share with us these pictures you're seeing now. They say the murderer stole Heidi's purse, her cell phone, a Virginia Tech lanyard, and credit card, also her digital camera, which was in her purse. They say none of those items have been recovered, but they could, of course, be a help in the case. They've also narrowed down a list of 6 different vehicles they're looking for information on. Now, Sheriff Witt again sent out a plea asking anyone for information to come forward to help them in solving this case, and he had this to say to the killer.
We have DNA evidence now. We are aggressively and actively
pursuing you. We will not rest until you have been apprehended.
A reward for more than $70,000 still stands in this case, and we have posted all this information, including the pictures of the items, plus the details of those vehicles they're looking for on our website, WSLS.com.
So I'll turn the light off and double my dosage. I know